And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we are building Janky decks in Commander. And I made a video a little while back about the Mystery Booster playtest cards. Some pretty interesting cards here if you've never seen them before. And one of the things I was talking about in that video is I thought a lot of these creatures had very interesting build-aroundable abilities, and I thought they would make super interesting commanders. So of course I put a poll in the description of that video so that everyone could go vote on which of those they actually want me to build. And the winner by quite a wide margin in that video was High Troller. Now, if you ignore the silly name and the really silly art, I actually think this is a really super interesting card. So 3 in a red, Troll Shaman 4/1. All targeted spells and abilities cost 2 less and have their targets chosen randomly. So of course, this is not a legendary creature. As always, whenever I'm doing this, if you plan on making this deck yourself, gotta okay it with your play group first. Obviously, it's a mono red creature, so this is going to be a mono red deck. And this ability certainly is a difficult one to build around for a number of reasons. Now, I will first give a little bit of a warning here that if for some reason you actually put this deck together, it will be difficult to play because every time anything is targeted in the game, you're going to have to figure out a system to choose things at random. So for example, if somebody has an effect like a Ghost Quarter that is going to target a land, you're going to have to figure out a way to target all lands randomly, right? You're going to have to do a lot of rolling or something like that. It will be a difficult deck to play in an actual Commander game, just throwing that out there. But of course, this example is another reason why this deck is difficult to play. I didn't put a Ghost Quarter in this deck, even though I almost always typically do. Why? Because a Ghost Quarter is almost as likely to kill your own land as it is to kill your opponent's lands, right? Because it destroys a land and all targets are chosen at random. So the land that you're actually wanting to destroy, whether it be your opponent's Cabal Coffers or Maze of Ith or whatever, the chances you're actually going to resolve it and hit that land is highly unlikely. So targeted land destruction is not going to be very good in this deck because you're likely going to kill either just one of your other opponent's basic lands or maybe even your own land. So it's not that good here. Now, of course, for that reason as well, it's going to make it so that your stuff is also harder to target, but also it's going to make it so that your stuff can get chosen at random as the target for that spell or ability. Of course, the big issue here is removal, right? Being able to targeted removal your opponent's stuff is going to be tough. A card like Chaos Warp, again, which I would always put in a mono red deck, I did put it in this deck, although it certainly is not nearly as good. It's only going to cost 1 red mana. That's pretty good, right? Because the cost is reduced, but anything I target with it, like the thing I really want to get off the battlefield, I'm now going to choose the target at random, and it's going to get that off the battlefield. Now, the little bit of an upside here, I suppose, is if your own thing gets targeted with Chaos Warp, of course, it says the owner of target permanent shuffles into their library and then reveals a card from the top. If it's a permanent, you put it onto the battlefield. So there is a chance that if you end up randomly shuffling your own thing into your library, you might get something off the top. That's kind of good. What's a lot better here in this situation is Wild Magic Surge, right? This does a similar thing to Chaos Warp, and I would auto include it in any mono red deck I'm making, but it is a lot better, and this is more the theme I went when building this, right? This is actually a difficult deck to build, and I had to think of how to advantage it me, right? Because whenever you're building around an ability like this that affects everyone, you want to try to advantage yourself. And Wild Magic Surge says destroy target permanent an opponent controls, right? So that means when your commander is randomly choosing targets, it's only going to choose the targets that things it is a legal target for. And of course, because this is only targeting your opponent's stuff, it can't target yours. So when you cast your Wild Magic Surge, it is going to randomly destroy a opponent's permanent. So there is no way that you're going to get hit by this. So that's why Wild Magic Surge is quite a bit better in this situation. I tried to more lean towards board wiping type of effects, stuff that isn't targeting. Brother's End, I think, is a great one. 1 red sorcery. Choose 1. Brother's War deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So of course, there's no targeting there. It's just going to hit all the creatures and planeswalkers in play, or destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. Again, no targeting, so it's just going to hit all of them. So that's a nice board wiping option or removal option in this deck that can deal with creatures and deal with artifacts. Of course, because our stuff is going to be targeted randomly, whether it be from our own stuff or from our opponents, having Hexproof or Shroud is great here, right? I got Champion's Helm, I got General's Kabuto. Now, this is the one situation where Hexproof is actually maybe worse than Shroud. Even though I don't have a whole lot of stuff that can possibly target our own things, a effect that gives Shroud, which General Kabuto does, equipped creature can't be the target of spells or abilities, yours or your opponent's. That means any removal we cast isn't going to be able to target our commander, whereas with Champion's Helm, it gives Hexproof, so we can't be targeted by stuff our opponents control, so any removal our opponents cast isn't going to be able to hit our commander, but it is going to be able to be hit by stuff that we cast. But I do have a very limited amount of stuff in this deck that can hit our own things. Of course, just giving Indestructible like Hammer of Nazan can be really good as well, because most targeted removal is going to be destroying. I also have Orbs of Warding, which will give us Hexproof, right? So again, any spell that is targeting players, we're now going to be protected from. I also got Veilstone Amulet. I like this one a lot, especially in a mono red deck, which isn't particularly great at protecting its own stuff. 3 mana artifact. Whenever you cast a spell, creatures you control can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. So you can cast a spell in response to your opponent doing something, and now none of your creatures can be randomly targeted by your commander's ability. Indestructible creatures work great here as well. I threw Brash Taunter in, Darksteel Sentinel. This certainly isn't a deck with a very dedicated win con. It's not really a great way to do that with this commander, but just having indestructible creatures is great. Of course, Brash Taunter will throw damage at our opponents. Just a great card in general in a commander game. Darksteel Sentinel is indestructible. It's also got Vigilance and Flash. It's a 3/3. It's not big, but we can use it to help close out the game. Of course, everybody wants to know the fun, interesting stuff that will actually work with our commander. Chef's Kiss is a really interesting one here. 1 red instant. Gain control of target spell that targets only a single permanent or player. So first off, before I get to the rest, this can work on our stuff too, right? Of course, this can work with our opponents. They cast a removal spell or anything that is targeting a single permanent or player, and we can target that with this. Now, of course, it is targeting, so the target is going to be chosen randomly, but there's probably only going to be 1 spell on the stack at any given time, so there only is 1 target for it, so we won't be hurt by our commander's ability here. Also, we can use this on our own stuff. Again, that Chaos Warp that we are casting, we can now gain control of that Chaos Warp and copy it, then reselect the targets at random for the spell and the copy. The new targets can't be you or a permanent you control. That's the important part. So now we can cast our Chaos Warp, copy it with our Chef's Kiss, and it's going to make it so that the original Chaos Warp can't target our stuff, and the Chef's Kiss copy also can't target our stuff. So what'll happen here is we'll end up getting 2 Chaos Warps that is going to randomly target 2 of our opponent's stuff, and because these things are targeting, they're going to be cheaper to cast. So this is actually only 3 mana to cast both of these, 3 red mana, right? So it's actually a pretty good play in this deck. Cinderheart Giant, again, because it's choosing its targets at random, we don't really care, right? Anything that is already choosing its targets at random, not really going to be a downside here. When Cinderheart Giant dies, it deals 7 damage to a creature an opponent controls chosen at random. The target's already going to be chosen at random, so there's no downside here. It's just likely going to kill one of our opponent's creatures. Maddening Hex, I thought, was an interesting one. Made for the Commander format. Doesn't see a lot of play in Commander. Sees a lot of play in Legacy, actually, which is kind of funny, because whenever enchanted player casts a non-creature spell, you roll a d6. Maddening Hex deals damage to that player equal to the result. Then attach Maddening Hex to another one of your opponent's chosen at random. Again, it can't target you. In a Legacy game, of course, you only have 1 opponent, so it's automatically going to keep attaching to the same person. It can't attach to you. Here, you have 3 opponents. It's going to attach to one of them randomly. Again, the random part isn't hurting us at all on our commander, and it's just nice little added bonus whenever our opponent is casting a non-creature spell. They're going to take some damage. It also really nicely fits with the theme of the deck, I think. Knight Rampager, again, another card that is choosing things at random. Now, we're not going to get the cost reduction here with some of these cards, but we're also not going to have a downside, right? I'm building around the downside of our commander as well. 4 and a red, artifact creature Knight, 6/5 with trample. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose an opponent at random. Knight Rampager attacks that player this combat if able, and when Knight Rampager dies, it deals 4 damage to target opponent chosen at random. So again, no possibility to hit us or hurt us with this card, and also we're choosing the targets at random, so there's not really any downside there. I threw Mystifying Maze in the deck. I thought this was an interesting one. Pay 4 and tap, exile target attacking creature and opponent controls. At the beginning of the next end step, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So this is an activated ability that is targeting a creature. So of course it's going to be reduced by 2 with our commander. So it's only going to cost 2. That's pretty good. Now it is exiling an attacking creature an opponent controls. Now that is a target, so we're going to be choosing it at random, but it's guaranteed to be getting one of the creatures that is currently attacking you, right? If your opponent's only attacking you with one creature, that's going to be the creature that is chosen. So you're going to get that creature off the battlefield and you're not going to have to worry about it. If your opponent is attacking you with 2 creatures, you are again guaranteed to at least get one of them off the battlefield. It might not be the one you want. I guess it's a 50-50 chance that you do, but either way, you're guaranteed to get at least one of your opponent's creatures that is attacking you off the field temporarily. Volcanic Offering, another fantastic card in the Commander game. Again, extra good here. 4 and a red, instant, but of course, because it is targeting, it is going to be reduced by 2, so it's only going to cost 3 mana. Pretty darn good. Destroy target non-basic land you don't control, and target non-basic land of an opponent's choice you don't control. So this is hitting 2 non-basic lands, and none of them can be yours, right? It has to be a land you don't control, so our commander is not going to randomly pick one of our lands here. So this is probably the best way to try to get those troublesome non-basic lands off the battlefield, because of course, you can only hit non-basic lands. Also, deal 7 damage to target creature you don't control, and 7 damage to target creature of an opponent's choice you don't control. So again, we're getting 2 creatures off the battlefield, none of which can be ours. They will be chosen at random, but at least we know they're not going to be ours. So this card is 3 mana, destroy 2 of your opponent's non-basic lands at random, and destroy 2 of your opponent's creatures chosen at random. That seems pretty good. Some of the really interesting fun fits here though. Alpha Brawl is a great one. 6 red sorcery. That's a really expensive card, but of course it's going to be reduced by 2, so it's only going to cost 6. That's not bad. Target creature an opponent controls deals damage equal to its power to each other creature that player controls. Then each of those creatures deals damage equal to its power to that creature. So this is target creature an opponent controls. So again, we don't have to worry about it affecting us. And of course, the target creature that we choose is going to be chosen at random. That part we don't have any control over, but it is almost guaranteed that we're going to be getting rid of a lot of our opponent's creatures here. We're going to end up targeting a random creature controlled by an opponent. That creature is going to deal a bunch of damage to all their other creatures, and then vice versa. I think that seems pretty good. It's almost a one-sided board wipe for one of our opponents. Flames of the Raise Boar is a great one. 5 and a red instant. Again, pretty expensive, but reduced by our commander because it is targeting. So it's only actually going to cost 4 mana. That's not bad at all. Flames of the Raise Boar deals 4 damage to target creature an opponent controls. Again, we're going to be picking a opponent's creature at random here, but that's okay. We're still going to deal 4 damage to it. Then it's going to deal 2 damage to each other creature that player controls if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. And guess what? Our commander does indeed have a power of 4. So we're going to get a really nice effect off of this card too. It's going to be random, but it's still going to be pretty good. Gauntlets of Chaos I thought was a great one and fitting in this deck. 5 mana artifact, pay 5, sacrifice Gauntlets of Chaos, exchange control of target artifact, creature, or land you control, and target permanent and opponent controls that shares one of those types with it. If those permanents are exchanged this way, destroy all or is attached to them. This is a funny card in this deck. I thought, again, it costs 5 to activate, which is going to be reduced by 2 because it is targeting. And the really interesting thing here is because our commander has a global effect, a universal effect that is affecting everyone, we actually don't really care if our opponents gain control of it, right? If our opponent accidentally gains control of our commander with this card, we don't really care. Our commander can be under the control of someone else. It's not going to affect this deck at all because it is that universal effect. So we can activate this for 3 mana, and what's going to happen is it's going to randomly choose an artifact, creature, or land. So there's a chance we choose our commander with this, or maybe a land, and then you're going to exchange control of a permanent that shares a card type with it. However, it has to be the same type, right? So if a land is chosen here, it has to be a land controlled by our opponents. This is going to be a really difficult thing to resolve, I think, in an actual game. I guess what would happen here is you would have to randomly choose an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield, and then depending on which is chosen, you will then have to randomly choose use that permanent type in order to exchange with. It's a difficult deck to play. Like I said, I think this is a neat fit in the deck though. Cerebral Eruption is an interesting one. 2 red sorcery. So again, it is targeting, so it's only going to cost 2 red mana. Target opponent reveals the top card of their libraries. Cerebral Eruption deals damage equal to these revealed cards' converted mana cost to that player and each creature they control. That's pretty darn good. If a land card is revealed this way, return Cerebral Eruption to owner's hand. So this is 2 mana and it's target opponent. So of course it's targeting, it's chosen at random, but random opponent chosen, we're okay with that. If they reveal a land, of course it's not going to deal any damage, but we get to use it again. And there's a pretty good chance they reveal a decent card. So again, this could be a bit of a one-sided board wipe for only 2 mana. I think it's a pretty good inclusion in the deck. And again, one of those cards that has no chance of hurting us. I like Brand of Ill Omen. Again, I put a lot of cards in here that I just thought fit the theme of what we're doing. Another thing you can do here is play enchantment auras, right? Because of course, enchantment auras, when you cast them, are targeting, so they are going to be reduced by 2. I should also point out all those equipment that we put in the deck, like Hammer of Nazan, that is an ability that is targeting your creature, which is going to be reduced by 2, right? So your equip on your Hammer of Nazan is actually going to only cost 2, assuming that you already don't have it equipped. So that is another way to go with this deck, is all of your equip costs are cheated here. Your Champion's Helm is actually going to be free. One of the things about this card, it doesn't say cost less than 1, right? So you can actually reduce things down to 0. So all of your equips are going to be 0 if they are 2 mana or less. And of course, they're going to be chosen at random. We don't have a ton of creatures in this deck, but if your Champion's Helm is reduced to 0, you can just easily re-equip it again until you get it on the creature you actually want it on, right? So that's another interesting interaction here. But going back to Brand of Ill Omen, there is a chance we can cast this on our own creatures. However, like I said, we don't have a ton of creatures. We just want to get it on an opponent's creature because it says enchanted creature's controller can't cast creature spells. So I'd say there's a very good chance that this ends up on one of our opponent's creatures. Whichever one of those gets it, that's going to be chosen at random, obviously, because this is targeting, but one of our opponents is not going to be able to cast creature spells so long as we pay the cumulative upkeep for this. So I thought that was a neat fit in the deck. Retribution is a really interesting one. And again, this is one where I'm not even entirely sure how the interaction is going to work. It's 2 red sorcery. So again, when reduced is only going to cost 2 red. Choose 2 target creatures an opponent controls. That player chooses and sacrifices one of them. Put a -1/-1 counter on the other one. So this is a removal option that isn't going to hurt us, which is really important, right? It has to be something an opponent controls. Now, the interesting part here is that you're choosing 2 target creatures that have to be controlled by the same opponent. So I guess how this would work is you would cast this, the opponent would be chosen at random, and then the creatures would be chosen at random, or maybe you would choose the first creature at random, and then the next creature would have to be chosen at random, controlled by that player. It's a bit of a difficult one to resolve. Again, this deck would be fun to play against, kind of, but in a way it kind of wouldn't. There's a lot of really weird interactions with this because of what your commander is doing. One card though I found, which is just really all upside with this commander, is Captivating Crew. This is a fantastic fit with this card. 3 and a red human pirate, 4/3. Pay 3 and a red, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. And of course, because it is targeting, we are reducing this by 2. So this is only going to cost us 1 and a red to gain control of a creature an opponent controls. Now, of course, it's going to be chosen at random, but we can just pay 2 mana, randomly gain control of an opponent's creature, then pay 2 mana, gain control of another one, and as much mana as we have, we can pay 2 mana to gain control of a whole bunch of our opponent's creatures. So this can almost be an insurrection on every one of our turns because, of course, they're going to be untapped, they're going to gain haste, and then we can immediately use them. So this really is a fantastic fit with this commander, or with this card. Of course, it's not actually a commander. It's a really interesting one. This was a really difficult build around because, of course, as a removal guy, I would normally put a lot of targeted removal in this deck, and a lot of it doesn't work very well, right? If I put a lightning bolt in this deck, it's just as likely that I'm going to shoot myself in the face with it because, of course, it's hitting any target, so it can hit any of the players, any of the creatures. The chances I'm going to actually hit the thing I want to is very unlikely, so I tried to avoid things like that. Like I said, I didn't put Ghost Quarter in the deck. I put Demolition Field in the deck, though, because I thought maybe that was a better fit. You're going to destroy target non-basic land and opponent controls, so again, you don't have the option of hitting your own lands here. You're guaranteed to be hitting one of your opponent's lands, and it has to be non-basic, so the chances you actually hit the land you want are pretty good. And again, the cost here is reduced by 2. 2, which means this is actually 0. You can tap this and sacrifice it without paying any mana at all. That's another important thing about this card. It says all targeted spells and abilities cost 2 less and have their targets chosen at random. You don't have that phrasing that you see a lot where the cost can't be reduced to less than 1. Here it actually can, so you can reduce cost down to 0, and that can be really, really important in this deck. It's a funny one for sure. It's an interesting one. I do have the deck list in the description below. If anyone can get their hands on this card and they actually feel like putting this deck together, again, you got to okay it with your play group. And once they play against this deck once, they might not want to do so again, because there is going to be a lot of rolling and, figuring out how to choose things at random. That's definitely the super difficult part here. It was a fun deck to build though. I actually wasn't super excited when I saw that this was the leader in the poll. And as I started building the deck, I liked the puzzle that I was trying to solve as I was building this deck. It was a really interesting one. Feel free to give it a run for yourself if you want to, but that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.